testing, testing. 1, 2, 3. Mic test, mic test. Hi, babe. All right, are we live? Oh, helps if I know these things. All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our Sparrow Quilt Company Stash Buster series. My name is Bradie, and today we are here working on this great quilt, which you can see behind me. It's called Stay Centered, and that is a free quilt pattern that is being offered at sparrowquiltco.com. If you want to join along in the fun that we're having, you can go to the website, sparrowquiltco.com, and you're going to see a picture of me, and you're just going to click on my face. It'll take you to another page where you can put in your email address, and we will send you an email with the pattern attached. This is a great pattern for anybody who's got a stash. It's an excellent pattern for someone who's just learning to quilt. It's a really good size too, not too big, kind of just right. It'll be a nice throw on your couch or that sort of thing. It's all straight line sewing, so for you beginners, it'll be just really good practice for you to get used to keeping that accurate 1/4 inch seam. Well, I want to first apologize for missing you all on Monday. Matt and I still have 7 children at home, and many of them were sick on Sunday and Monday, so I had to forego my live streaming on Monday in order to take care of little children, but we're back today, and hopefully you are able to join us on all the fun. My good friend Sheila is back working with us here at the South Side, and she, as you can see, has been working hard on stitching up this project. So last time, I think we had most of our oranges done, and you can see that she's put together the whole row. We've got our gray row all together. I'm loving these blues. The blues are my favorite so far. I got our yellows are done, our greens are done, and you know what? We had to recut some of the reds because I actually made an error in my cutting, so Sheila has been kind enough to fix that error, and she is now working hard on all those red blocks. So thank you so much, Sheila, for that. One thing that I did want to point out is you can see with my oranges, I'm kind of wishing I had a bit more value change in my oranges there. Although I have several different fabrics in here, they kind of just look like one solid orange. Don't you find? Don't you think? But when I look at, say, my blues, I've got a really good variety of blues as far as lights, mediums, and darks, and I'm liking the way that's turned out. Much better compared to just the solid block of orange. So if that's what you are after, that's my suggestion to you, is to make sure that you've got lights, mediums, and darks in there, and it gives your block a little bit more interest. I did pretty good on my yellows. My greens are good. Reds are looking really good over there too. But, oh, and my grays were good too. I guess I just need to order more orange fabric. What a terrible shame. Where's everybody watching from today? Leave me a comment there and let me know where you're watching from. Have any of you begun the Stay Centered quilt? I would love to see a pic. And this pattern is designed by Sheila, who is working hard to finish it up for me over there. So I'm sure she would love to see your pictures as well. So please leave a picture in the comments, and we'd be really happy to take a look at those. So we're kind of at the point now, guys, where we have to start joining our rows. Once we've got them all together, obviously we need to start putting them to each other so that we can form this great big quilt. One of my favorite tricks to use while I'm joining blocks is fork pins. And if you've never heard of fork pins before, it is a great product by Clover. And I'm going to hold it up here. Hopefully you can see it. If not, we'll try and narrow in on it a little bit better later. But it is just a pin with a U-turn in it, and it's got 2 sharp points, and I'll show you in a few minutes here how I use those. But it is a really, really handy tool for our intersections. Matt's gonna zoom in was going to say zone in. Oh, put it on my hand and let go of it. See, I just need to follow instructions. Now these pins are super sharp, super sharp, and they will not hesitate to just go right into your little finger. So take your time with those, insert them carefully so that you do not injure yourself. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take down 2 rows here, and then we're going to change the view a little bit. I'll stand to the side, and they will change the camera so that you guys can watch me as I pin my rows together. A little bit of acrobatics here today. Here we go. So my orange row, do we need to do anything else to change up the view at all? My orange row is on the outside. You want number 2? Now, first of all, let's make sure that our colored blocks are all to one end because those are going to be at the bottom of the quilt. Now, I've mentioned to you before, I don't consider accuracy in quilting to be life or death, but I really do like to give it my best effort. So I use these fork pins to make sure that my seam intersections line up nicely, and that just keeps things nice and square and keeps it looking nice. This fabric costs money and your time is valuable. So let's put our best effort into quilting so that we get a nice project that we can be proud of. All right, so this row I'm going to bring over so that it's right sides facing each other. Put the orange one on top. And what I'm looking for at this point is my intersection where the 2 blocks join one another. And what I like to do is called nesting my seams, and I'm sure most of you do this as well, but if you've not learned this before, then hopefully this will help you. So my gray blocks on the bottom, the seam is pointing to my left, and my orange block on top, this seam is pointing to my right. And what that allows to happen is that the intersections just nestle right into each other, and it looks like the seam is just one continuous line instead of one block here and the next block over here. And not that that really matters, but I want it to line up as best as I can get it to. So I've got my fork pins ready. And what I'm going to do is line up those seams as best I can, and what I'll often do is put my thumbnail in the top seam just to kind of really press it into place and make sure that it is actually touching the seam of the block on the bottom. So once I have those 2 seams so that they're right alongside each other, I am going to poke my fork pin in and back out, and because there are 2 prongs on my pin, it takes both sides of that intersection and it just brings them together and it holds them in place really nice and allows me to stitch everything together. Now I am bad because I sew over my pins, and my mom always tells me that I'm probably forcing my granny to spin in her grave because my granny was a great seamstress too, but apparently she never sewed over pins. Hopefully Granny's sewing was accurate because mine is not unless I use pins, so I sew over them all the time. My suggestion to you, if you are also going to sew over pins, is just take your time, sew a little bit slower. I never go full out speed over my pins. I just take my time, and that way if it does hit a pin, it's more of just a thunk rather than a slice through the pin, and the pin can, fly up through the air. I met a lady at retreat once who had just gotten a pin in her eye from that exact same scenario, so please be careful. I'm not telling you to sew recklessly and endanger your eyes. I would never do that. All right, so I'm moving on to my next one here, and I have got those seams touching. They're just best of friends right in there right now, and I'm going to pin them in place. And I'm just going to keep moving along until I have every intersection pinned. All right. So 2 more nestled right into each other, and I'm going to give those a good pin. I think Matt's there zooming in so that you can get a better peek. But like I mentioned, my bottom seam is pointing to the left, my top seam is pointing to the right, and that allows them just to touch each other really nicely, and it eliminates bulk in my seam. If both seams are pushing in the same direction, they tend to fall off one another, and then they misalign just a little bit. So that's what we're trying to avoid. Now, for those of you that are watching, have you had a chance to share this video with your friends? We're going to have a draw today again, like always. Any guesses as to what my prize is going to be? Fork pins. So I'm going to choose 2 winners today, and I'm going to send you each a package of fork pins. So please go ahead and share this video with your friends so that they can watch along too and learn some little tips and tricks and just have some fun using up their stash. And please, of course, if you've got any questions, feel free to leave them there in the comments. And one of my helpers here will read me your questions so that I can answer them.
Just a note. Look within that square.
Right here?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is where you get your best view. So this is where I'm going to try and keep my hands. All right. Get those nicely in place. Sheila saved my day today. She found the fork pins. I was going to bring some from home, but she found them for me, so that was a good thing. And then at the ends, I don't bother with a double pin. I just use my regular, whatever type of pin. Today I've got flower heads. So I just finish it off like that. All right, now I'm ready to go over to my sewing machine, and I'm just going to stitch down that edge. I'll put all these in for now so they don't fly off. These are not fun to step on either. Remember I mentioned how sharp they are? Good. Okay, so are we switching camera back to this angle over here, please? All right, so we've talked before about our seam allowance, and us quilters typically use a scant 1/4 inch, and so I've got my seam gauge out, and I'm going to drop my needle in my scant 1/4 inch little hole. Now what you've seen me working with in the past is my ideal seam guide. I will attach it to the bed of my sewing machine, but today because of my pins, they're going to interfere a little bit with my guide. So today I'm just going to use a little piece of painter's tape. Not very high tech, but it'll still keep me on track so that my seam allowance is accurate. And then I will go back to my seam guide once I'm not relying on my pins anymore. Okay. Raise my needle, get this little dude out of the way. Okay. Now I'm ready to start sewing. And I am lining up my fabric with my green cord. Thank you. I'm lining up with my painter's tape there so that I'm nice to the back, so that I get a nice smooth start. Small technical issue. Okay. All right, we're going to try to avoid kicking the cord and causing further problems. All right. Now I'm coming up to my fork pin, so I'm going to slow right down, and I call this just walking over the pin. Just a couple, just easy pace, nice and slow, not too fast. Coming up to another pin, so we're just going to slow right down. There we go. Sometimes I like to just hold the pin straight so that it's not twisting as I sew over it, just to make sure that things do stay nice and straight and square. Just looking at my stitches just in case. Like we talked about this before, you should always check how your stitches look. A couple of stitches in, and I hadn't done that yet. So now, all right, we're nearly there. Another pin, so I'm going to slow down and just take my time. As soon as it starts to twist, I'm going to straighten her out. And like I mentioned before, I'm always watching my seams on top. I can't help the seams underneath because I cannot see them, but the seams on top, I'm making an effort to keep them going in the direction that they've been pressed in order for them not to flip and result in bulkiness in my quilt top. Last block here. Slow down for my pin. There we go again. All right. My end is not quite lined up nice and straight, so I'm just adjusting that. There we go. All right. Trim my threads like I'm always nagging you to do. There we go. And then I can start removing my pins. And I want to put them back into the box because otherwise I lose them. And then I step on them. And then I'm crying. Walk around here in the quilt shop sometimes with no shoes on. Last thing we want is to be stepping on pins. And if this is your first time tuning in, this is the Sparrow Quilt Company Stash Buster series, and we are working on the quilt that you see behind me. It's called Stay Centered, and it is a log cabin style quilt that we are working on in an effort to use up our stash. Being as it's January, we're all a little bit frugal right now, being as Christmas just passed. And so it's nice to use up what we've got, what we have on hand. And if you would like to download that free pattern, you can find it at sparrowquiltco.com, and you're just going to click on my image there on the front page of the website. It'll take you to a new page where you can enter your email, and you will be sent an email with the pattern attached to it so that you can follow along with us. It's a very simple quilt. It uses all 2.5-inch strips. So even if you just have a jelly roll or a couple of jelly rolls in your stash, you'll be able to use that in order to make this quilt. All the fabric requirements are either a fat quarter or a fat eighth, which is a pretty minimal amount of fabric. And of course, if you would rather do all your background fabric in one fabric, that's fine too. You don't have to use an assortment. It's your quilt. Do what you want. You also don't have to follow our color requirements. You can do it however you like. Okay, so we've got our 2 rows sewn together with the help of our fork pins, which is our giveaway today. So in order to be entered in the giveaway, please share this video. Right underneath the video on Facebook, you're going to see a little share link down in the bottom right. Go ahead and click that to share with all your Facebook friends. So there I have got 2 rows sewn together.
What do you do if your bottom seam flips?
If my bottom seam flips, I will usually just leave it. Sometimes if it's creating a lot of bulk, I might snip it so that the bulk of it goes back to its original position, and then there's just a tiny bit that's flipped. There's kind of some discussion over that method, that could weaken your seam allowance or that it could lead to fray. I've done it a million times. I've yet to see any results or poor consequences as a result of that. But surely if you have an experience, please feel free to share it. That is usually my technique, is that I will just snip it a little bit past the flip so that the rest of the seam can go back to its original spot, and I'll just leave that little flipped area in there. Yep, okay, so I'm going to scoot over here for a moment. We have another question? Okay.
Fork pin example. This is good time.
Sure. So the question is, what is a fork pin exactly? The fork pin is a great product by Clover. Most of you have heard of Clover before. Can you see it there, Elle? Is it clear enough, or shall I hold it in my hand?
A little closer to you and hold it in your hand.
Okay. So essentially a fork pin is a pin with a U-turn in it and 2 prongs, and a very, very sharp prong. I've got the package here, so I'll read. It's a very fine pin. It's got a diameter of 0.56 millimeters, 35 pins in the package, and my favorite use for these is just lining up my seam intersections. Of course, the price tag is over all the text there, so I'm unable to read it. Be careful. Like I said, they are extremely sharp, and they enter human skin a little too easily, so you want to be very careful when you're using those. They come in this handy little box, which I think is really great. I always keep, just because these pins are so fine, they tend to not coming through. We're good? We're back? Awesome. Okay. Are we on the appropriate camera there, Miss L?
Something fiddled with there. Got it right.
Got it. Good. All right. Hi, everybody. We're back. Okay, so I'm ready to start pinning my next 2 rows together, and again, I'm going to use my fork pins. If you're just joining us, a fork pin is a U-shaped pin with 2 prongs, and I am going to be inserting it on either side of my intersection here so that it brings that 2 pieces together really nicely so that I get a really nice square block instead of any shifting. So the trick here is to make sure that my top seam is pointing to the right and my bottom seam is pointing to the left, and then I will be able to just make them nest into one another. I kind of push it in with my fingernail to make sure that it's right in there, just touching that other seam, and then I'm going to put this pin on either side of my prior seam. And then I'm just going to make my way along to the next intersection. And again, I'm looking for my top seam to point to the right. My bottom seam is pointing to the left. And I just want those to kiss each other. They are just the best of friends in there. They're little lovers. And then I put that fork pin on there to keep them together. And make my way up the row. This quilt is making me really happy today. It's so bright and sunshiny. We finally got a bit of warming up here in Edmonton. How's your weather from where you're watching? We all had a lot of cold recently, so it's nice to get that warm break. Yes? Okay, sure. So we're going to go a little slower this time because I do tend to rush through things and forget to instruct. So this seam right here is the one that I'm trying to line up with this seam here. These are my 2 blocks that I am joining to each other. My green fabric is pointing to the left. My yellow fabrics are pointing to the right. And because of that, they just, nope, that's not going to work with my hands. But it allows them just to join each other so nicely, and it reduces any bulk that's there in that seam. So hopefully you can see how those are touching each other. I'm going to lay that down flat, and I just pinch it between my fingers until I can get my fork pin. And I'm going to poke it in, poke it out, and that just holds my little intersection together.
The yellow towards the camera?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Can you see that a bit better?
A little bit.
Now feel free, folks, to ask any questions that you've got on your mind. That's my goal, is to help you, give you some tips and tricks to make your sewing life easier.
How do those pins help make the material nest? Because it goes on either side.
How do the pins help the material nest? Because of the U in the pins, it brings those prongs together, and it just makes those 2 seams stay in the position that you've put them, because it's pinning from either side, so it holds it in place better than just a single pin. So my bottom one is pointing to the left, my top one is pointing to the right, and like I said, I just stick my fingernail into that top one to make sure that it's actually touching the other side, and then I just hold it in place and pin it.
How do you ease them together if it's not perfect?
That's a great question. So inevitably it's going to happen where you've got a block that's bigger than the one that's under it, and so that feels like there's a little bit of excess. If possible, you want to put that excess fabric down towards your feed dogs. Your feed dogs help eat up any extra fabric, and it helps ease things in together. What I will also do, I will sew past this intersection, and then from here to here, I pull it as tight as I can while I'm sewing. And it might seem like it's stretching a little bit, but it just helps ease things in together when I'm doing that. I just hold it really nice and straight and taut. If you hold it really taut, you can usually make things even out a bit. Because there's always a little bit of give in our seams. We don't want to pull them apart, of course, but there's always a little bit of give where we can make it work. The good thing about fabric is that it's not rigid. It gives us some flexibility. Okay, so I got this one all ready to sew, and I'm just heading back over to my sewing machine to get going on that. All right. Here we go. I'm going to sew this row together, and before you know it, we're going to be done. I've been starting to think about quilting designs and what we're going to put on this quilt. Would you stay with something angular like the block itself? Or do you think you would do something swirly and kind of soften all those angles? I love swirls and soft edges, so that's probably the direction I would go. There's so many designs out there, though, it's really hard to choose sometimes. There we go. And like I said before, I'm just slowing down when I encounter that pin. I'm just walking over it with my sewing machine. I don't want it to have a hard impact, force my pin to break, maybe fly up into my eye. We don't want to have to use safety goggles while we're sewing. I don't know about you, but when I'm sewing, I'm always using my left hand to kind of distribute any fullness that I have got and to hold things in place really well. I find that my seam stays straighter when I do that type of thing, and it gets a little bit less of this drunk driving type of look. And that's also how I would hold down my seams as I go so that they stay in the proper direction. Someone says what?
Trace? Is she
Trace? Trace Priest?
Oh, it's... Oh. She would long arm it with curves of some kind to offset all the straight lines.
Trace says that she would long arm with curves to offset all the straight lines. And Trace can say that because she's got an APQS quilting machine, so she can easily do that.
Lauren wants to know where we're located.
Lauren, we are located in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada.
Lauren also says that Swirly would look nice.
I think so too, Lauren. Sorry?
Katie and Kathy also think that Swirly would be nice.
Nice. Yay. Good choices. Yeah, on the one that we did originally, what was this pattern called? Seamless? Loop-the-loop. So you can see lots of nice little loop-de-loops all over that quilt. And I think it suits it. Like, it just gives it a nice... It softens all those angles and hard lines. Okay, guys, we're getting there. Almost done this seam. And you can probably see that I am constantly shuffling and adjusting. I really want things to stay nice and straight as best I can. I'm always trying to do my best. And I've admitted before, if I have an error, I will pick it out once. Any more than that, and it stays in the quilt. A little bit of humility. A little bit of human error. None of us humans are perfect. I don't know why we expect quilts to be. So if you're not quilting for show, where of course you need to do the highest possible quality of work you can, because competition is tough in the shows, but if you're just quilting for your family, a little bit of human error is not the end of the world. But I do suggest you do the best job you can. Okay. I was just checking my tension there. It didn't look too good for a second, but I think that it was just the two colors of fabric tricking my eyes. So if you are just joining us, you are watching the Sparrow Quilt Company Stash Busters series, and we are working on a quilt pattern called Stay Centered. It has been designed by our very own Sheila van der Linden, who is back working with us here on the south side. If you're local and you haven't heard yet, come by and see Sheila. She has been working hard, keeping me on track with this quilt. She's finished piecing almost all my blocks. She's working on the reds over there while I'm over here yapping at you guys. So I'm very grateful for that assistance. But you can see here, do you think that you could maybe zoom in on one of my intersections here, Elle? So the whole point of the fork pins, and the reason that I'm using them, is to make sure that the corner of this block meets perfectly with the corner of this block.
Back it up towards you a little.
Okay. And so where I'm trying to direct your attention to is this seam right here. And hopefully you can see it. But look how great that intersection turned out. There's no overlap, there's no gap, it is just right.
Camera 2.
Oh.
So if you want to hold it up to this one.
Okay, sure. Can you see it?
Yeah, that's good.
So this is the intersection that I'm trying to show you. You can see how this seam looks like it runs right into this seam. There's no gap in there. There's no overlap. It is just a nice square intersection. And that's my whole goal when I'm using the fork pins, is to make sure that my points and my corners all line up nice and square. So that is the benefit that fork pins can offer you. So if you have not shared this video yet, go ahead and share. I will be choosing 2 of you at the end of this video to receive a package of fork pins, because I think they're the best. Now I'm ready to pin my next row. It's my favorite. I always like blue. Yes, thank you. I'm short. Barbara?
Yeah.
So Barbara has asked if I only pin at intersections, and on this quilt, yes. For the most part, as you're attaching each log, it's the length of the piece you've already pieced, so there isn't really any intersections. It all just sews together very nicely. It's when I'm joining the blocks together, when I'm joining the rows to each other, that I want to make sure each block stays in line with the block beside it. The words are not flowing today as well as they should. So thank you for putting up with my stumbling. All right, so now I'm going to attach my favorite blue row to the pretty yellow row beside it.
Marianne Fox says you've gone sleeveless. It must have warmed up in the tundra.
Oh my word, Marianne, it is hot up in here today. Yes. I had a sweater when I began. It didn't last very long. Maybe it's these bright colors that are warming me up. Sometimes it's in your mind. Sometimes it's actually in the air. We really had a very bad cold snap, but now it is past, and we're actually above 0 today, +2, and that's Celsius. I don't know what that converts into for the US crowd, but it's nice today. But we also had some freezing rain last night, so of course I had to text all the children today. Drive safely. Give yourself extra time. This mum gig never quits. It just doesn't seem to shut off. All right, so here I am joining my rows again. My bottom row, the yellows, my intersection or my seam allowance is pointing to the right, and with my blue, my seam allowance is pointing to the left. And I'm just going to carefully pin to ensure that things stay the way I want them to. And I am using the clover fork pins for this job today. Now, when I overlap the seams and they're on top of each other and they're not in the position correctly, you can actually feel that. There's a bulkiness in the seam that you just feel right away. And you may not recognize that feeling the first couple of times you use them, but the more you use it, you just get used to it. But you also don't want there to be a gap between them. You want them to be actually touching each other. And so sometimes I'll kind of open them up a little bit so that I can see whether or not they're touching. And then once I can see they're touching, I will actually pin them in place. Moving along. So for those of you who are following along and have begun this quilt, I hope that you will share some pictures with us. I think even the other viewers would love to see what you've been working on. Okay. And in case you were wondering, you are watching us live in a real quilt shop. We are located in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, and the shop here is called Sparrow Quilt Company. We have a long arm rental program upstairs. You might even be able to hear those machines up there. Our nephew Dylan runs the computerized machine, and he finishes customer quilts all day long, as well as supervising any renters that come in and rent the long arm machines to finish their own quilts. And that's a lot of fun. It's really great to be able to say, I made this. And here's Sheila. Look, everybody, this is Sheila. Say hi. And she has finished up my red row. Look, doesn't that look good? Thank you, Sheila. Awesome. Now I can finish up this quilt today, guys. And you get to watch. Oh, come on now. There we go. I won't pin it this time. Oh, that looks so good. See, lots of nice variety in those different prints as far as their dark, medium, and light versus my oranges that are just kind of all one value. So look for that when you are choosing fabrics for this quilt. Get a bit of variety in there as far as light, medium, and dark. All right. How are we doing for questions there, Elle?
I had one.
Anything new?
Can you use 2 single pins instead of a fork pin?
Oh, so the question is, can you use 2 single pins instead of a fork pin? And absolutely you can. You absolutely can. It feels like a bit more work, like I'm just inserting 2 at one shot. But if you had extra pins, go ahead and do it that way. It just will help you on either side of that seam. Poke one here, poke one here. It would work. But there's just something about that U at the top that brings it together, and it's very beneficial. But by all means, yes, go ahead, use 2. Okay, so we got that seam all pinned, and we are ready to stitch again. My goodness, we're making great progress. So in case you just tuned in, I just want to apologize that I missed you all on Monday. We had a crew of sick kids, and of course family comes first, so we had to get those little hoodlums all looked after, but everybody's back and healthy today. And luckily Sheila kept me on track by doing some of my sewing for me. And like I mentioned earlier, yes, I'm a naughty girl. I sew over my pins. But see, I'm approaching a pin now, so I've slowed right down, and I am going to walk over that pin. Just slowly, slowly, stitching slowly.
Number one. Brenda
Because the last thing I want to do is have my needle hit my pin. You risk the pin breaking, and of course then it can fly up into your eye. I've never had that happen, but that doesn't mean it can't. I've met people who have had that happen to them, and there's just something really frightening about having a sharp object flying towards your eyeball. It would certainly make sewing a challenge if you could not see. We are cruising right along. I'm getting close to another pin, so I'm just slowing right down, kind of one stitch at a time, just make my way across. There we go. Once I've finished this big long seam, then I can join my red to this piece, and then I can join those two to each other, and holy moly, we will have a quilt top. Okay. So then, of course, we'll have to give it a good press and make sure that everything is nice and flat. And we'll have to choose a backing fabric. Might be too wide for fireside, but maybe I could put some wide minky on it. I got some of the minkies that are 90 inches wide, so then I don't have to piece anything. So I'm all about fast and easy.
We've got to iron.
Okay. They're going to keep pressing while I keep sewing. Good. All right. How are we doing for time, Miss L?
11:30.
Okay, good. All right.
I'd like to know what's the difference in scant quarter-inch and a normal quarter-inch.
So Joyce has asked, what's the difference between a scant quarter-inch and a normal quarter-inch? And I guess the difference is that a scant quarter-inch isn't really a quarter of an inch. It is a little bit less than a quarter of an inch, maybe a hair difference. And so what that allows for is when we piece our quilts and then we open the seam up, the thread itself takes up a little bit of room when you open up that fold, and the fold never really opens entirely flat. There's always a little bit of fabric lost. Elle, is it this camera that I'm looking at right now? So there's always a little bit of fabric lost in that opening there. Thank you, Sheila. So that takes up space, and then what ends up happening is this quarter-inch ends up measuring a little bit more, or we've just lost a hair's worth of fabric in that fold. So when we open it up, we don't end up with a 9-inch block, we end up with an 8 7/8 inch block, and then we're not accurate. So I'll show you on my seam gauge here. Can you see what I'm showing there, Elle? So here is my scant quarter-inch. And the one right beside it is the true quarter-inch. And it's literally just a hair's difference. But that tiny little millimeter-ish can make a difference when you factor it across an entire queen-size quilt. When I am teaching my students, I show them one of my personal quilts. It's a Bargello. And when I put that thing together initially, it was actually kind of hourglass shaped because I had changed sewing machines in the middle of making that quilt. I began with a Janome and I switched to a Pfaff. And a Janome is kind of notorious for having a fat 1/4 inch foot. The Pfaff is a bang-on 1/4 inch. So when I put it all together, my seam allowances were bigger in some places than in others. And over the course of the entire width of the quilt, it made a difference. So my quilt was actually shaped like this, wider at the top and wider at the bottom, and a bit narrow in the middle. I had to deconstruct a large portion of that quilt and re-sew it with my Scant 1/4 inch in order to make it a little bit wider through the center. Still to this day, it is a little bit narrower in the middle, but I just quilted the crap out of it in order to just make it lay flat. I hope that helps answer your question. It does get a bit rambly there when you ask me questions. I'm sorry. I'm a good talker. All right, so I'm going to put this one aside. Have I done this wrong? Did I do something backwards?
The blue one's on the wrong side. That's okay.
I mixed it all up, guys. Yep. Oh, I did a real good job. So look. In the original quilt, blue is on the outside, and in my quilt, blue is on the inside. All right, well, this just shows you how easily mistakes can happen. I think I'm just going to live with it. Either that or we can have a nice tutorial on how to pick, but that's not very entertaining. So, although we discovered the coolest tool on the weekend. It's literally like a hair clipper, and you just zzz between the two layers, and it just buzzes them. You guys, I can't wait to show you this new tool. It is so cool. One of our students had it here on the weekend. So we'll be getting those.
Oh, with it. Yeah, we'll be back. Because green is still there. Put red next to green, right?
On the outer edge. Yeah. Oh, well. It's not the end of the world. Right? A little bit of humility. Remember I told you? I also told you not to point out your mistakes to anybody.
It was weird that they were.
See, that's what you have to do. Just laugh at yourself. Because you just made a huge error in front of how many people are watching today? Awesome. I don't want to know, she says. Okay, so let's try not to mix this one up. This is going onto here. So we are going to pin like this. All right, guys. I think I'm going in the right direction now. Well, everybody, this is probably one of your last chances to share the video if you want to be entered to win the fork pins that I have been playing with all day. I was going to say, luckily up to this point I haven't poked myself, but let's just wait and see what happens, shall we? So fork pins are a great little pin made by Clover. What camera am I on, honey? Okay. So fork pins, it's a U-shaped pin with 2 prongs, and I am going to use it to keep my blocks lined up correctly. At the top of each block, I'm finding that intersection, and I am going to make sure what I can see here, my red is pointing to the left, my white underneath or cream is pointing, red is left, cream is right, and that's going to allow these 2 seams to just nest into each other. They're going to touch really nicely, and then I'm going to pin on either side of that intersection, and that will hold things in place for me while I do my sewing. Now, I know a lot of you will pull your pins as you go. That's not typically the way I sew. My mother says I'm probably driving my granny in heaven crazy, but I'm getting really good, accurate quilts, Granny, so just be okay with it. I'll sew slow and be careful, I promise. So I'll join this one, and then we'll have one more seam after this. And remember, if you've not gotten your pattern yet, you're going to find that at sparrowquiltco.com. Just go there, enter your email, and we will send you the pattern by email. Already starting to think about the next project. We're going to try and do a quilt pattern each and every month from start to finish. After we've gotten this one quilted, I'll show you how I machine bind quilts. That's right, I said machine bind quilts. I am not a patient girl. I like to get things done. And the quilts that I've bound by hand in the past, I end up machine binding them down the road because my hand stitching doesn't hold. And that's okay. Machine binding is fast, and I know it's going to last. And it would be different if I was submitting my quilts in for a show. Then of course I would have to do them by hand, or it's the preferred way to do them by hand. But I'm okay with taking that little shortcut. It's more durable and it makes my job faster. All right, so last intersection on this row. My red pointing to the left, my grays are pointing to the right. There we go. And pin this last one just with a regular straight pin. I'm a big fan of Clover's pins. I don't know about you. Sometimes they can be a bit expensive, but I think it's worth the cost to have a good product and have it behave the way you need it to. I think that's important. We want to enjoy our hobby, not be fighting with our tools. So I always think that it's worthwhile to invest in good tools. How are we doing with questions there, Al? Anybody asking anything? All right. So
Lots of people sew over.
I'm not the only one who sews over pins. Yay!
A lot of people saying you should turn it upside down. And a lot of people saying that the no light would be upside down.
Yes. Yes, it would. So you've all caught me on camera messing up, but that is okay. I think it's more important to remember that we're all human and we can easily make mistakes. And that's the last time I'm talking about this. I'm not pointing it out again. All right. Coming up to a pin, so I'm just going to slow down. Someone recommended to me once that I could pin from this direction so that it wouldn't have to go under the needle, and I didn't find it as effective. I did try, honest. Sometimes we just get used to doing things a certain way. And I've recently realized that I'm that person. I'm a little bit picky. Walking over that pin, and sometimes you just need to give it a little hand, push it through. All right, here we go. So have any of you had much luck in organizing your stashes? And if so, how did you choose to do it? Are you organizing by color? Are you organizing by size of fabric? Sometimes it's hard to organize by color if you've got some bits that are on bolts and some bits that are tiny little fat 8s or charm packs or whatnot. Those obviously won't play as well with the bolts, but I'm always curious how people organize their things because, well, sometimes there's a better way, so why not learn from what other people have to offer? Okay, we're cruising along here. And I am sewing today on my little Eversewn Sparrow 20. They are great little machines, nice lightweight, perfect for, say, taking to a class or going off to retreat with. They'd be perfect for a beginner sewer, someone who's just learning. Just a nice, simple machine, easy to operate, not too many fancy functions. And no, we do not make these machines. We just stumbled upon them. And of course, because our name was on them, we had to carry them. And I'm really looking forward to getting in the next level up. There's now a Sparrow 30. It's got a few more features, few more stitches, all that kind of stuff. I'm looking forward to getting that one in when it's available. There we go. Trim our threads. Good. All right. So be careful when you're pulling your pins as well. Very easy to poke yourself, which is never fun. Put those right in the box. Well, for sure on Friday we will have a finished quilt top to show you. Perhaps we'll even just get to the quilting on Friday and get that part done. But if you've never watched before, we do a live stream on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and that is our Stash Busters series. And on Tuesdays and Thursdays, we try to stream from upstairs so you can watch Dylan working on the customer quilts. Now, wouldn't that be fun if you've sent a quilt into us and you got to watch it being finished? That's pretty cool. And it's just really neat to see how the long arm quilting machines operate. They are beautiful machines, and it's just fun to watch. Okay. That row is on there now, and I am ready to add my last row, my blues, yellows, and greens. Isn't this looking bright and springy? I'm loving it. Perhaps this is the reason it's warming up outside. We can hope. So I'm just going to make sure that my right sides are facing each other. All my neutrals are up. Got it all in the right direction. And this is my last seam to pin here. We are moving right along. Oh gosh, I was scared for a second there. I had the wrong section. Nope, I don't want those. Here we are. All right. Next, we're going to have to choose a design and choose a backing fabric. And I am a big fan of Fireside lately. I'll tell you, I put it on all the quilts. This one's a little bit wider, so I would maybe have to either piece my Fireside, or I could use a wide cotton or flannel. Those come in 108 inches wide, so that makes it nice and quick. You don't have to piece anything. I know a lot of you like to use up your scraps. I don't have the patience for that. I just like to buy or pull a big chunk off a bolt and go for it. Maybe I'll have more patience in my next life. All right. And here's my next intersection, and the key here is making sure that the two seam allowances are pointing in opposite directions. And that allows them to nest in there together, and it reduces the bulk in our seams. It makes things nice and flat, which is good too when we're quilting. The less layers that our needle has to puncture through, the easier it is on our machines. All right, one more here. That one's pointing right and that one's pointing left. Oh, That's fine. All right, here we go. Do, 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 do. All right. So Miss Landon was away for a moment. She's probably going to check if there's any questions from yous.
What were you asking?
What's that?
Sometimes someone says by color, sometimes by designer, and sometimes by size. I love to organize.
Ah, nice. So I had asked, how do you organize your stash? Oh, good. And who was that one?
Danielle.
Danielle says she likes to organize sometimes by color, sometimes by designer, and sometimes by size. So we've got different components in your sewing room, it sounds like. And I kind of work the same way. All my bigger pieces are organized usually by collection. And then I've got scraps, and they're usually organized more by color. And then all my pre-cuts are kind of in another area. I find it hard to dig into the pre-cuts sometimes because they're so pretty in their bundles and their rolls, and I just want to keep them like that so they become more like decor in my cupboard. But my cupboard has a glass front on it, so it looks quite nice on display. But I have guilt about not sewing things up that I have purchased. So it's always good to use up all that stuff that you have got in your stash so that it doesn't make you feel guilty. And then you can feel better about the next purchase you make. All right. That is the last point of pinning. Put these little guys away. And we are going to sew up this seam. What's our time, Miss L?
11:53.
Okay. I'll sew up this seam, then we'll choose a winner, and then we're going to be done for today, but you're all going to join me back on Friday, right? You can help us select a design and a backing fabric, and we'll load up this quilt on the frame, and we will get it all quilted up. There we go. Have any of you shared photos of your projects in the comments? I know a lot of you had commented previously and said you were working on it, so we want to see it. We want to see those great quilts. We got a lot of photos in last summer when we did a contest with this pattern before, and the winner won some long arm quilting on their quilt, and there were sure a lot of pretty ones. Making sure I'm all lined up before I go ahead and sew. And that seam flipped over, so I just raised my presser foot so that I can push it back in the right direction. Now I also always like to sew, I start with my needle down, and then when I stop sewing, it stops with my needle down, and that prevents me from pulling the quilt out from underneath the presser foot because, you know, I get impatient and I tug and I pull, and that keeps my spot for me. It maintains my accuracy. So that is another tip that you might want to use when you are sewing as well. I also do that with the long arm when I have to pause my stitching. Sheets for backing. Pardon? Yeah, there are a lot of opinions on using sheets for backing. Give me just a second so that I can give you my full attention and give you my honest answer. Almost there. So typical quilting cottons are usually about a thread count of 80 from what I have been told, and Don't quote, that is factual. That's just what I have heard from various sources. A bed sheet that you purchase may have a thread count of about 200 or more even. It seems the more luxury type sheets have got a higher thread count. And fabric is manufactured through a weave of fibers going in opposite directions, horizontal and vertical. And so the thread count just refers to how many threads are running in either direction. Like I mentioned, typical quilting cottons are about an 80. Your average sheet is about 200. So what happens when we use a sheet... Sorry, pardon me just a moment, guys. Too many things going on. Okay. When you use a sheet, the weave is so tight of the fibers running vertically and horizontally. Instead of your needle parting those fibers and making a nice neat hole, what happens, because the weave is so tight, it punctures the fibers as it goes through. So in my personal opinion, I would prefer to use a thread count that is equivalent to what I've got on my top. So I stick with regular quilting cottons, or I will use a fireside or minky type of backing. I do not ever use sheets. And I understand that sheets can sometimes be more affordable. I would never turn away a customer with a sheet, but I like to explain the reason why I'm hesitant to use a sheet. And that is just because it's going to puncture those fibers and leave holes on the back that look almost like little tears versus just neatly parting those fibers. I hope that makes sense. And that is my reasoning for why I don't use sheets on the back of my quilts, nor do I recommend using sheets on the back of your quilts. I would highly recommend just sticking with ordinary quilting cottons. All right, if you have any further questions, please feel free to leave them there in the comments. And remember, that's just my opinion. It's your quilt. You may do whatever you like with your quilt. All right. I'm so excited. This whole thing is together. So I'm going to have Landon hold up a corner and we will show off our hard work. And again, a thank you to Sheila for helping us get this quilt done. She really did more sewing than I did. Oops, there goes my coffee. That was awesome. Right onto the power. Nice. Oh dear.
That tape is inconvenient now.
Okay, I'll just kind of... All right. Thank you, Sheila. All right, we'll hold that up in just a moment. We're going to try and get some paper under the power here.
Just kick that over here.
Sure. Okay. Thank you so much. Okay. All right. I'm going to try not to get coffee on the quilt. And we will hold her up. Today was a bit of a mix-up, but that's okay. There we go. All right, everybody. The big reveal. There it is, all put together. And I'm not pointing out my mistakes. You all witnessed them live on camera. So, there is our finished Stay Centered quilt, or is finished top. We're not even on this.
Back to one.
We're good now? All right, so there is our finished stay-centered quilt top. If you are interested in making this quilt, please visit sparrowquiltco.com where you can put in your email and we will send you an email reply with the pattern attached. All right. Thanks for watching and following along, guys. Thank you, Sheila. Perfect. All right, now we need to pick 2 winners that are going to receive some fork pins. So hopefully you all shared the video to be entered to win, because winning stuff is fun. Good, Alex is there. Okay. All right. Yes, please. So they are just finding me some winners, and we will get those fork pins in the mail to you. If you do not win any fork pins today, you can find them on the website at sparrowquiltco.com. Like I mentioned, I find them really valuable when I am pinning any sort of intersection. I made a gigantic Bargello, and all of my corners are like bang on. It really, really helped me achieve the accuracy that I wanted when I was piecing that big quilt, despite the fact that it's shaped like an hourglass. Okay, so Lauren Dupuy Martone, we are going to send you some fork pins, so please send us a private message and include your email, phone number, and shipping address. We'll get those out to you, and I need one more winner for fork pins, please. Lynn White. Yay! Hi, Lynn! Lynn always shares our stuff, and she is such a great follower. Congratulations, Lynn. Congratulations, Lauren. Lynn, please also send us your phone number, email, and shipping address, and we will get those out to you. Now, all of you tune in again at 10:30 on Friday morning, where we will be picking out a pattern, picking out our thread choices, picking out our backing fabric, and we're going to load this baby up on the long arm, and we are going to get this quilted. Thanks again for watching, everybody. I'm sorry my show was such a disaster today. I appreciate you staying tuned in and putting up with all my antics. We will see you on Friday. Take care, and bye for now.